Hey guys, time to jump back into World War II, and today we are going to start looking at the policy of appeasement and what that meant for the start of World War II, at least in Europe. So all you really need is this worksheet that I've already emailed out to you. It says appeasement and the start of World War II across the top. You'll need that. You'll need something to write with, and you'll need about 15 minutes of attention to this little video that we're going to put together here, okay? So let's get started with the policy of appeasement and the start of World War II. Now, hopefully you will recall that the Treaty of Versailles was written to bring an end to World War I, all right? What you may not know, however, is that Germany had no say in the Treaty of Versailles because it was written almost completely by the United States, by France, and by Great Britain. So, because of that, the treaty was incredibly harsh towards Germany, with several provisions intended to make sure that Germany never became a threat again in Europe. So, what did the Treaty of Versailles say about Germany specifically? Well, first it said that Germany had to accept full blame for World War I, which is a lot for a proud country like Germany to do, to accept full blame for something. They were also forced to repay over $30 billion in reparations, or for repairing Europe and the countries that were involved in World War I. Germany also lost territory. They lost the Polish corridor. They lost the Saar coal fields. They lost quite a bit of territory, actually, as a result of World War I. And that didn't go over too well with the Germans. The Rhineland was demilitarized, and we're going to talk about what the Rhineland is here in just a little bit. And then Germany is also forced to reduce their armed forces to just 100,000 men. And on top of it, they cannot have any submarines or U-boats, as the Germans called them, and they also cannot have any airplanes. All right. So those are just some of the provisions of the Treaty of Versailles, and we're going to be talking about some more provisions of that treaty as we go on with this presentation. Okay. Now, everything is going to change in 1933 when Adolf Hitler becomes the new German chancellor. And what he basically does is he thumbs his nose at the treaty and says, I'm not going to follow it. All right. Now, one of the first things that Hitler does when he takes over is he looks around and he says, we really don't have enough room here for all the superior Germans we're going to have. We need some space. So what he wants is going to be referred to as Lebensraum, or living space around Germany. Lebensraum is a term you're going to hear several times when you're learning about World War II history. Here you can see Hitler talking with his advisors about just how they're going to go about getting that living space, or that Lebensraum, that they're talking about. Now, no one is going to just give Hitler territory, so he realizes that he needs to rebuild his army, regardless of what the Treaty of Versailles says. So he creates what is known as the Wehrmacht. Okay, the Wehrmacht is the name that's given to Germany's armed forces from 1935 to 1946. And here you see a picture of a doctor examining some fine young German men who are going to be enlisted into that Wehrmacht, or that German army. Okay, now the Wehrmacht is made up of three parts. The first one is called the Heer. That is the foot soldiers, the standing army, if you will, like what we would just refer to as the army, the Germans refer to as the Heer. The Kriegsmarine is the German Navy. That's the U-boats and the ships and stuff like that. And then they're probably most famous for their Air Force, which was known as the Luftwaffe. All right. Now, again, as you recall, the Treaty of Versailles had originally said no U-boats, no airplanes, but we are going to see Germany go ahead and develop those anyway. The Treaty of Versailles also said that Germany can only have 100,000 men in its army, but Hitler ignores that, and he starts off in 1935 by building his army up to 600,000 men. Now, that's not a massive army by today's standards necessarily, and it's certainly not a massive army by the time we get to the middle of World War II, but 600,000 is a significant jump from what the Treaty of Versailles said they could do. And do you know what people are going to do about it? Absolutely nothing. Here you see just a small representation of that army, or the Heer, that Germany built up rather quickly, really, as they're preparing to create their Lebensraum, their living space. Now, also in the Treaty of Versailles, there were provisions that said that Germany could not fortify or occupy the territory known as the Rhineland. And you can see the Rhineland is this area right here with the little hash marks on it. That is the Rhineland, okay? The Rhineland really serves as a buffer zone between Germany and Belgium, and then Luxembourg and also France. So here's Belgium right here. This little country right here is Luxembourg, and then this is France, okay? And down here is Switzerland, which remains neutral. Over here is Austria. Here's Czechoslovakia. This stuff's all going to come into play very shortly, as is this region here, known as the Sudetenland. We're going to talk about that in just a couple of minutes, all right? Now, Hitler claims that Germany is feeling threatened by its neighbors, so he ignores this part of the Treaty of Versailles also, and he sends his troops into the Rhineland in 1936. So once again, another part of the Treaty of Versailles is ignored, and once again, nobody does anything about it. All right. Here what you see are a bunch of Nazi banners throughout Germany as we start to really see the German population accept Nazism. This street is lined. You see a lot of soldiers down here and a lot of people that are entertaining themselves with this Hitler parade that's going to be going on at some point. All right. Now, in 1938, Hitler decides that his Lebensraum was not expanding quickly enough, so what he wants to do is he wants to join Germany with Austria, which is where Hitler was born. This is going to be referred to as the Anschluss, and like pretty much everything else that Hitler has done up to this point, it was of course forbidden by the Treaty of Versailles, and Hitler of course ignored it. Now, this really shouldn't have come as any big shock to anyone, because if anybody at all had bothered to read Hitler's book Mein Kampf, he stated that he planned to reunite all ethnic Germans, and that would of course include Austria. But since Germany and Austria had been allies in World War I, they wanted to make sure that that was never going to be a situation again, so the Treaty of Versailles banned them joining together, and yeah, Hitler just ignores that also, okay? Now, as you can see here, the people of Austria lined the streets to cheer the Nazi occupiers following the Anschluss, but there is some debate about whether or not Austria really wanted to join Germany. The Austrian government actually really didn't want to merge with Germany, but the enthusiasm of the people who greeted Hitler and his army showed that a lot of Austrian people were actually very much for this Anschluss. It actually kind of surprised a lot of people in the Austrian government ranks. They really didn't think the people were in favor of it. The people very much, however, showed their support for the Germans and for the Nazis when they came rolling into Austria. That brings us up to 1938. And in this year, Hitler announces that he wants to take back the Sudetenland. And in this map, you can see the Sudetenland is everything that is in green. Deutsches Reich, that is actually the German spelling or the German word for Germany, or the German Reich. So that's what you're looking at here. So this portion of Czechoslovakia, the Sudetenland, had actually once been owned by Austria, and there were more than 3 million ethnic Germans that lived here. So that was Hitler's exterior reasoning for wanting it. His real reason that he wanted it was because he wanted the resources that were in the Sudetenland, which this map shows you were significant. It tells you 70% of Czechoslovakia's iron and steel is produced here. 66% of its coal is produced in the Sudetenland. 70% of its electrical power is produced here. So this is a big deal for Hitler. Coal, iron, and steel, electrical production, those are all important if Hitler's going to move forward with his plan to dominate Europe and to gain that Lebensraum that he really says that he wants to have, okay? So the green area there, that is what is known as the Sudetenland, okay? With good reason, this concerns a lot of the world's leaders, even if Hitler sometimes looks less than scary, especially in, shorts like this. Anyway, the United States was already taking a stance of isolationism following World War I, and that's FDR down there in the bottom right-hand corner. And most of the people in the United States also viewed Hitler as being a European problem. So, if he's a European problem, what are the European leaders going to do? Well, in September of 1938, there's a meeting that's going to be held between the leaders of Great Britain, France, Italy, not Czechoslovakia, and they're going to decide what they are going to do. So, in this meeting, it was decided that in an effort to appease Hitler, they would give him the Sudetenland. They're just going to give it to him without asking Czechoslovakia's permission. They're just going to give it to him. They're doing this in exchange for Hitler's promise that he is done with his Lebensraum movement and his reunification of ethnic Germans. Hitler, of course, promises, yep, I'm done. This is all I'm going to do. But no, it's obviously not going to be the end of it. The other people in this picture, by the way, if you look down there in the bottom left, you'll see that is Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain of Great Britain. And up into the top right is a guy you don't hear a whole lot about. His name is Edward Daladier of France. All right. And then here at the Munich conference, you see these people once again. You see Chamberlain on the left, Daladier right there next to Hitler. To Hitler's left would be Benito Mussolini, and then that is another Italian aide to Mussolini there. So these are the participants in the Munich conference. Nowhere in that picture do you see anybody from Czechoslovakia. Also nowhere in that picture do you see anybody from the United States or from the Soviet Union. Now, of course, the reason why the Soviet Union's not there is because at this point in time, they're actually more on the side of Germany than they are on the side of the Allies. Again, there's no war going on just yet, so things are a little bit different than they're going to be when the war finally breaks out. All right, now, following this conference, Chamberlain returns to England pretty confident that peace in Europe has been attained by appeasing Hitler. However, it is pretty interesting that Daladier of France had no problem seeing right through Hitler and his lies. All right. Daladier even said, quote, "Today is the turn of Czechoslovakia. Tomorrow it will be the turn of Poland and Romania. When Germany has obtained the oil and wheat it needs, she will turn on the West." End quote. Perhaps it should not be a shock then that once Hitler takes over France, Daladier is actually going to be arrested, and he's actually going to spend some time in Buchenwald concentration camp as a prisoner of war. So here you see the outcomes of the Munich conference. Czechoslovakia's leaders are not permitted to attend, and Germany was allowed to annex portions of Czechoslovakia, including that region that we talked about known as the Sudetenland. Okay, so Neville Chamberlain goes back to Great Britain, says, "I have met with Hitler and he agrees to peace in our time if we give him the Sudetenland, and now we have that peace." No, you don't, Neville. You really don't. Here you see some Czech women in the city of Cheb who are greeting Hitler with the Nazi salute in 1938. If you look at that woman there on the right, do you think she's crying tears of joy, or is she potentially crying tears of terror? Could probably be either, really. Probably at this time, possibly joy. That joy is probably going to change significantly in the upcoming months. Now, this is Winston Churchill. Churchill is not yet Prime Minister of England, but that's going to be coming up in a little bit. He's not thrilled at all about the Munich conference results. And as you can read here, he refers to, quote, an appeaser as one who feeds a crocodile, hoping it will eat him last, end quote. Okay, so if you look at your worksheet then, what does it say, what would you write down for the definition of appeasement? What is appeasement? We'll talk about that at the end of it, okay? So what is appeasement? Now, in the United States, a lot of people thought appeasement was bad business, including the soon-to-be famous children's author, Theodore Geisel, whom you probably know better as Dr. Seuss. You can see for yourself Seuss's opinions on appeasement if you look at these two cartoons here. This one says, "Remember, one more lollipop," and then you all go home, and you've got this little guy standing here in the middle. His shirt, if you can't read it, says appeaser, and he's handing out candy to all these beasts and monsters here, of course, all of them having Nazi swastikas on them. And then this one over here is also titled The Appeaser, and you see that we've got our little guy down here playing some happy tunes to try and appease I guess it's an octopus, I don't know, this beast underwater, again, also obviously representing Nazi Germany. So those are some cartoons done by Dr. Seuss, who was a big propagandist for the United States during World War II. And we'll talk about propaganda in an upcoming presentation in about a week or so. Okay, so the appeaser. 1939, of course, is going to roll around, and we all know that Hitler didn't keep his word. He ends up occupying all of Czechoslovakia, and then on September 1st, 1939, Germany invades Poland, which is viewed as the official start of World War II, as both Great Britain and France are going to declare war on Germany on September 3rd, 1939. Now, Germany would then go on to more conquests, and when Germany invades and occupies Norway in April of 1940, Neville Chamberlain resigned as Prime Minister of Great Britain in May, with Winston Churchill taking over and then ramping up the fight against Hitler's Nazi Germany. All right? So this is really going to be the end of what we're going to know as appeasement, because Winston Churchill was anti-appeasement from the get-go. He was very much opposed to it. While Neville Chamberlain, the guy on the left, is the guy that's really pretty much credited as being the author of the appeasement movement. Remember, WWII of France wasn't a big fan of it, but they also didn't want to go to war with Germany, so they went along with the appeasement plan of Neville Chamberlain. And what about America? What's America going to do? Well, you can see FDR here says that America is isolationist and wants to avoid another deadly war. However, we must help our allies. Okay? So we're going to have to stay tuned to see what the United States is going to do. So, looking at your worksheet here then, up at the top, you should see some of the Treaty of Versailles negotiations, or their, Treaty of Versailles, what's it say there? Regulations. I'm sorry, I can't read, don't have my glasses on. And then right here we have a box that says appeasement. So what would you put down as the definition of appeasement? I, for the definition of appeasement, would put down something to the effect of an agreement made between parties where one side gets what it wants just so the other side doesn't have to deal with them. And that's really what we saw going on here. We saw that Germany got what it wanted so that Great Britain and France didn't have to do anything about the problems that Germany was causing, okay? It's kind of like when you give a little kid that's screaming and throwing a tantrum in a store, you give them a piece of candy instead of taking that kid out of the store like you probably should. That's appeasement. It's typically a very bad policy because it starts telling the person, or in this case, starts telling Germany, hey, do whatever you want. And not only are you going to be able to get away with it, you're going to get more on top of it. That's pretty much what happened with Hitler. Down here, I gave you several different events and the years that happened. And then over here, it says the predicted response. So this year, this happened. Okay, in what year did this happen? And how did they respond to it? What ended up happening? All right. And then down here at the bottom, it says the Munich conference. All right. So give me 3 points about the Munich conference and then the results down here. All right. So the Munich conference, maybe give me the 3 main people that were there or weren't there. Actually, I'll just make it easy for you. Czechoslovakia wasn't there. So give me 3 main players that were there. Give me the results of it. Take a picture of it, email it to me, or bring it to our next Zoom meeting and show me that you got the work done, okay? Coming up, we're going to be looking at the United States response. We're also going to be looking at Pearl Harbor. And as I told you, we're also going to be looking at the role of propaganda in World War II. For those of you that were in the classroom, I had a lot of propaganda posters up on that back wall from several different countries. If you can remember, we had a Dutch poster back there, Italian, German, Japanese, American, British, Canadian. Those were all hanging up on that back wall in the classroom. So those are some of the things that we're going to be talking about. All right. If you have any questions about appeasement, or if you have any questions about some of the previous videos, like the rise of the Allies or the rise of the dictators, just drop me a note at my school email and I will get back to you as soon as I can. But until then, make sure you get this worksheet done and either email me a picture of it or bring it to our Zoom meeting. All right, we'll talk to you later.